There are aspects to Dune, the setting and the characters and how things work, that I just intrinsically believe are impossible to ever convey through other kinds of media aside from a novel, especially filmic things like television miniseries and or movies. They can come close, but there's just some things about it that, like, how, and specific to the topic of this video, how exactly is one to depict the concept of other memory in a movie or TV show that could possibly do it justice and not just seem like some trite Scorpius from Farscape or Six from Battlestar Galactica in Baltair's mind, where, there's just this other character that's there, but the other characters don't see, kind of stuff, which was novel for a time back when Farscape and Battlestar Galactica were new, but, we've moved past that, and that's been absorbed at least into sci-fi culture, if not the greater pop culture surrounding it, but has rippled out there because of things imitating that particular trope. That'd be a good device for specific possession scenes, perhaps, with Aaliyah, if we ever get to a point in films where she's grown up and then becomes possessed by the spirit of her grandfather, the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. Because even describing what it is, like, I'm not sure that's ever going to be able to be conveyed to the audience properly. Like, as it is, it's Frank Herbert taking a lot of liberties with scientific terminology. Perhaps this is in his own way, his own kind of a Deepak Chopra-ism, where, like, Deepak Chopra likes to, use a lot of quantum physics, in his philosophical ramblings. But, someone who's taken, general relativity classes and all that kind of stuff. I'm hardly an expert on these things. I'm not a particularly wonderful mathematician or anything by any sort of stretch of the imagination, but I have a better grasp of what quantum mechanics is trying to convey than Deepak Chopra does, and in such a way, I feel that Frank Herbert has either made a few mistakes or purposely just taken some liberties with things like the concept of genetic memory. Genetic memory is kind of more speaking about just kind of the environmental imprint that could happen generation after generation from various, species clade bloodlines experiencing certain conditions over and over and over again until it becomes imprinted into the genetic matrix. And so instead of being something that those creatures would have to forcibly undergo adaptation to during the course of their lives, instead they will ratchet up automatically at birth that bit of adaptation. In terms of evolution, I am much more into the more modern ideas of adaptive evolution as opposed to random mutation evolution. Random mutations tend not to be beneficial to the host organism, despite the fact that they occur. There are gene marker kind of mutations that one can use to track, but those typically don't cause, like, physical mutations. There's something that's just kind of buried in the mitochondria and all that kind of stuff. But, evolution as form of, like, forced adaptation, or sometimes even conscious and willful adaptation, makes a lot more sense, because, like, we can observe that even in the course of an individual animal's lifetime, they can make certain small minor adjustments to their physiology as needed and just compact it over time. That all adds up, kind of a thing. But in the way that, you take a dog that you've, been living in a more southerly warm climate, and you've had this dog for years, and then you, like, move up north into a more cooler temperate climate, and suddenly that dog will, grow a little bit shaggier, and, over time that will lead to breeds of dogs. If multiple generations of that dog's bloodline is exposed to the colder temperatures and has to grow that heavier coat of fur, at one point they'll just start off already with the heavier coat of fur, and then the spectrum to which they can push that within the course of a lifetime grows towards shaggier and shaggier and shaggier. Same thing with having to stretch your necks or use your beaks differently, all that different kind of stuff. And that's also why you have species that have lingered without having to change at all, because, like, they never really had any need for that adaptive pressure. And that's genetic memory. in Frank Herbert's universe, there is kind of the element of fantasy that is there, and so in his version of genetic memory, those who have been trained properly, with both Mentat training and or Bene Gesserit training, and have gone through the transformative chemical event that is the taking of the bile of the worm and all that kind of stuff, so that one becomes, a Reverend Mother and or the Kwisatz Haderach in the case of Paul, or his son Leto II, technically the third. I'm really curious where the second movie is going to pick up from at this point. Like, if they jump right to the next scene, I'm like, it's a perfect opportunity, especially because of how much time has lingered between when this movie was made and when they actually have gotten around to like starting filming the second point, where they should just use this as the jump forward, because there's a point in the book where it leaps forward a while. I'm sorry for that tangent. Like in Frank Herbert's things, like, people who've gone through the transformative process are able to neurologically link with other people who've undergone that process and basically transfer a chain of memories from each other. In the case of the people, though, who are awakened in such a fashion while in the womb, because they are unborn and they are still part of their mother's chemistry, if their mother goes through that while they are still in development, they will be pre-awakened, and instead of inheriting a chain of purposely transferred memories, because as Reverend Mothers transfer their memories to each other at the moment of death, or close to the moment of death as necessary, over and over, they've accumulated hundreds and hundreds of female lives within this chain of memories. The unborn, people like Alia and also Ganima and Leto II, they're able to access a chain of memories through, like their genetic ancestry, which is kind of like a next level kind of thing, and which leads to, like stuff like Alia becoming imprinted with the Baron Harkonnen, or even Leto II openly admitting that, like, in many ways he's possessed by his ancestor Agamemnon, which in the Brian Herbert books gets changed to, instead of the Atreides being descended from the actual Greek king Agamemnon from the Odyssey and Iliad, instead, was a dude who had a robot body, and he'd transfer his brain in a jar around between different robot bodies, and he tried to take over the world, and he just named himself Agamemnon because he thought it sounded cool. Which is way lamer, but going back to just only read the Frank Herbert books, please. Going by the older interpretation of what that was implying is that, Leto II had looked back to like the most primordial archetypical king to help guide his hand as he ruled his empire for 3,000 years, thereabouts. And that's only possible because of like the direct ancestry thing. Because the Reverend Mothers only normally just transfer their own personal memories and the other personal memories of Reverend Mothers they had that kind of mental contact with to each other. There is an internal discipline within that memory bubble. It's kind of like, it's like a holographic recreation in your mind of the person, kind of a thing. I mean, like certainly like borderline schizophrenic, psychotic kind of stuff, and yet like purposely indulged in the setting to create, human beings capable of doing stuff that, actual human beings shouldn't be capable of doing except under extreme circumstances. But I don't know, like there's just ways that's going to be portrayed that's just not really going to, I don't think, do it the proper justice. It's that accumulated weight of memory, like allows like these individuals to have the super long perspectives they have, and part of Leto's ability to see into the future better than his father Paul is predicated on the fact that like he has a much broader depth of historical perspective, and so he's got a much larger pool of data to pull from to be able to project all the various permutations of things. And Dune, the whole thing with prescience and seeing into the future is much more a mathematical calculation than it is some sort of like, a spiritual revelation albeit to the outsider or even to the inside observer, one could interpret it through that lens, obviously. And to most people outside, they're going to more likely see it in a supernatural occurrence kind of framing. A person who's properly trained will understand that like they're actually just doing a thing that anyone could conceivably do with the proper training and dedication and all that kind of stuff. It's just few are able to get themselves to that place. Also, I guess because of the spice transformation, that's obviously a thing with males. Only a few of them have ever kind of been able to get to that position. I still feel it's kind of weird that like it's how quietly it's kind of slipped by that like in Dune, there's like a lot of things that are very much like gender or sexual essentialism kind of built into it that you can't really get away from. If you could have a trans woman Bene Gesserit, then the idea that they've been needing to breed someone to be a Kwisatz Haderach, there is no need for that because if people with Y chromosomes are able to become Bene Gesserit anyway. So it's just weird how like overlooked that's been. I don't know. Stay waspinated.